again, our presenters tonight, we're going to get a few things straight from a previous meeting, and Mr. Spring had some concerns. Mr. Spring.
Yes, I have a concern, basically, when we had Principal Graziano, I believe is his name, from the Baldwinsville.
Dr. Graziano.
Yes. He mentioned two things when he was making his pitch for a new elementary school,
Correct.
Which we know we're progressing, and we're in the process with Senator Brewer's help to get that land. That he mentioned there, and it was concerning to me because I had remembered something about a report that was done in 2003. He had mentioned about that there was asbestos and lead in those buildings. Not saying anything that evening, I wanted to go back and read that report again to make sure I was correct. This report was done by SMMA Associates, Cambridge, Mass. in 2003 for the Templeton Elementary Schools, and this was done for the Narragansett School District and the Narragansett Regional Building Committee. In each of those, it basically states there is no asbestos present, and it's recently been abated in each one of the schools. That's Templeton Center, Baldwinsville, and East Templeton. It says nothing addressing any lead paint issues also in this report. I found nothing in going through this. And I read and reread it to take and make sure that I had the facts here. And I don't know where he got his information, but if we have a conflict in the two reports, we need to take and resolve that. As I had talked to you earlier, parents have enough today to take and worry about bringing youngsters up, and they need to know that the school is a safe place, especially when you read about things that are happening elsewhere, that we don't have additional issues that they should worry about and be concerned about. So we really need to resolve that. The other thing that that in going over the preliminary budget, and you saw me ask.
Are we shifting from that? Because I'd
Yes.
like to respond to that, if that's okay. Our facilities manager, Bill Claybaugh, I just got in touch with him because obviously we rely heavily on our facilities manager to tell us about the conditions of the building. He confirmed that he did, in fact, believe that there is asbestos tile in the gym cafeteria, and also that the walls have lead paint. I asked him the resource for that, and every 6 months he has to file an asbestos hazardous energy response something. I can't read the last word, but it's an official report he has to file every 6 months about the condition of the building, and it's reviewed every 3 years, and it in that identifies the asbestos in the tiles. So I've asked him, in addition to that, he's done testing on the paint, and I guess there's a test you can do and it can demonstrate that it's lead paint. So I've asked him to confirm with a professional, if not tomorrow, next week, the validity of that. But he was very confident. I said, are you sure? I told him about the report. He's very confident that what he's saying is truthful, but I appreciate you bringing out the discrepancies between two reports. I'm not sure for the elementary building how thorough that was at. Clearly, I wasn't here in 2003. So if we can kind of agree that we'll look, and I think the best way to do it is actually test the tiles. Yeah, I think we just test the tiles, and I think we test the paint. And we're gonna, he has a plan to do it with professionals. If you want to be present when that's done, I can have Bill give you a call.
Sure.
Okay?
The other issue.
If the district paid to have it abated back then and it was not abated, that's something that needs to be addressed also.
That's a really good point.
Because this did not come for free.
Yeah, I don't, was it part of an OPM study or something? I don't know. Well, I'll look into it,
Yep.
and if you want to be there, that's fine, but that's a really good point if it wasn't abated.
Well, we can bring that up at the next facility meeting. That'd be just in a few weeks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Anything else, Will?
Yes, the second one was when you had presented the preliminary budget.
Yes.
There was a 81 18 split, and I had asked each of the principals when they came up as to how many students to break out between Templeton and Phillipston.
So
and adding those up.
I actually, I knew you needed those numbers, and I didn't mean to put you off last time, but the numbers that the principals have right now today really don't associate with how we do the enrollment. But what I did for you was I've done a new income sheet based on all of the presentations that you've made, have been made to date, plus the presentations tonight. That income sheet does not reflect any increases in our contractual obligations with our staff, which is we were ready to present for the next week. In addition, I have a sheet here, which is just since, I think it's September and October and November, not even December. This is an enrollment report showing the ins and outs, the withdrawals and entering students in the district, and you're going to be able to see clearly that the enrollment fluctuates fairly a lot. So what I did today was I took the income sheet. I went and I rechecked the enrollment figures that I had. And if you guys can just take one, I don't think they need all those. I rechecked the enrollment figures I had, and where I get these enrollment figures is from the October 1st report. So we just are looking at not total enrollment in Narragansett, we're looking at the total enrollment of Templeton students and the total enrollment of Phillipston students, and then we get a total of 1,247, and we do the percentage from that. So does that make it a little clearer? So
yeah,
school choice.
The figures that were given that night, in addition to, because I had asked the high school principal to supply some information also, and he did send me that with the breakdown. And when I added all those up and I started doing percentages, I didn't use calculus, didn't use regression analysis, simple math, and I came out with a split that was much different than what you had on the preliminary budget. It was more like, for Templeton, it was a 76% versus a 25% for Phillipston in the amount of students.
But see, you weren't using, we have to use October 1 enrollments. We have to pick a point in time and use October 1 enrollments. That's why I showed you with the entering students and withdrawing. They're in and out all the time. So what I do is I go back to our most recent October 1, and I count up all the Templeton students, not including preschool, because that's a separate, that's a grant-funded program, and I split it that way. Tonight, I went back and I looked at our enrollment book, which you're welcome to come see anytime you want, in the office, and if you look at the bottom of this income sheet, you'll see 1,022 Templeton students and 225 Phillipston students for a total of 1,247 of students from the district. Now, we have more students in the district because we have school choice students, but those don't factor in when we're looking at the percentages. And that 800...
Well, I did take the fact that we had the school choice folks out of the number. I only used the figures that were presented that evening to end up finding out where we were at. And I was surprised because looking at my background, because in engineering, quality engineering, I did know that there was a percentage of error here that we could have, but I didn't expect that they can see as much as a 5% error in the calculations between the figures that were given that night and the figures that was on the paper.
Which is why I had recommended to my principals not to give information of current data, because it's really not relevant to the budget process. The numbers that Sean gave you from the high school, that will inform next year's budget, because they'll inform next year October 1 numbers. But we don't, nothing in this budget is really working off of current year. I mean, even this Chapter 70 is going back, the wealth factor goes back, I think it's 1 year, if not too, but I'm not positive about that. So the numbers that were given verbally by the principals were not necessarily accurate. They were probably giving you ballpark figures, but I'd be happy for you to come into the office and I'll show you our enrollment reports for the past few years, and you'll see that the numbers I just gave you on this new income sheet are from our October 1 report. Does that clear it up a little bit?
And you're referencing the Sims report in October 1st.
Correct.
And this is a state report, so that would be beneficial to see. You file with the state your enrollment as of October 1st. Grant funding is either October 1st or another date, but it all comes off of this state form. It's filed with the state of Massachusetts. So those numbers don't change. That's what October is. The flow numbers change, but October 1st is a filed form and it can be checked.
Right, and these came off and we keep a record of what we
Right, but
input.
what will be informative is that actual Sims report where you identify the number of students. That's what she'll get off the website, I would imagine.
So do you understand the difference why your numbers are so, the numbers that the principal gave?
Well, I understand.
Okay.
Right, I truly understand. I have rolling averages when I was a quality engineer, so I understand
Okay.
that you have fluctuations, but I didn't expect a 5% fluctuation in the numbers. I mean, I expected plus or minus a 1.5% or so, but not almost 5%.
I don't still have a copy, but I mean, this is a lot of kids coming and going. And we have quite a few more coming than going. So, I mean, it does fluctuate. North Central Massachusetts does not have stable enrollments right now. Just across.
And that wealth formula figure, that wealth formula is only figured every 2 years. So it's always a little behind, I guess.
It is behind. So that's why I brought you this information tonight, and anyone's welcome to come see the enrollment book in the office. Okay, so are we ready to go?
Yeah, all I needed was clarification on those.
There you go.
I mean,
And
I'm
glad I
looked at a
brought
lot
the
of
sheets for
information
you.
over, and it seemed like there was a difference here. We need to take it and end up clarifying that.
So Ann Morgan, our special ed director, is going to present her budget, and the copy's going around.
I think I have it now. And how do you want to do it? I mean, you've got it in front of you. Do you want me to go through it? Or do you want to look at it and ask questions?
I think that's a better way.
Look through it and ask questions.
Well, if you have some places where there's going to be a big question, you might want to explain that before everyone gets excited.
I don't think we have anything like that.
No, we have nothing exciting.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't speak.
I have a question just starting this budget as we look at it. How much of it is, how much do you receive in federal funds? I know that's not on this budget.
Yes,
but
this year's was 361,000 something.
Close enough.
Yeah, 361.56 was this year's. We never know until later in the spring what next year's will be yet. But it's never terribly different than that. It's not drastically different. Yes. It isn't quite as volatile as Title I is.
Thank you.
There's some acronyms on here, so if you want to find out what those are, just ask Ann.
Stop it.
And tell us a little bit about some of the schools that some of the kids have to go to.
Okay. Let me see. We have 18 students out of district, and 1, 2, 3, 4. 9 of them are medical. In other words, they're very medically fragile kids, so we wouldn't have the nursing facilities to deal with them. And the rest would be behavioral. And some of them, well, all of them, pretty significant.
And can you talk a little bit about the students that you've been able to keep in district and how you've been able to do that? So even though our costs on personnel are a little higher, but overall what we're saving?
Yes, this past spring, I realized all of a sudden we were having lots of behavioral issues in the high school, and some in the middle school as well, but it was mainly a high school issue. We realized that I had 4 kids that were just standing on the door, and I needed to start thinking about where they were going if I didn't do something. And when you've got that many, then you may as well think of personnel to keep them here. And so we did go ahead and start a program that Jason Donovan is running. And we do have it in the high school, and so far, nobody that we put in that program's had to go out. So, yeah.
Very successful.
Yes.
And typically a placement for those 4 kids would cost about
they
how much?
The cheapest would be $42,000, and it would be up to, those all range from $40,000 to $60,000, some thousand.
So you're talking
Those
about
behavioral ones.
$150,000 to $180,000 if we weren't able to keep them in
Yes,
district?
if we weren't, yes, yes.
What about the elementary schools?
In the elementary school, I would say up to this point, practically all of the kids that were intensive in need were autism spectrum kids. And we have a lot of people really well trained to deal with those kids. But beginning last spring, we began to notice that we were also getting kids that you would just really call behavioral. And at this point, we have about 7 in the elementary schools. They're really not autism spectrum kids. They're kids that we have to deal with behaviorally. And we've also transferred a staff member over from the high school to an elementary to start working with those kids. I mean, he's actually started working with them already, but we're kind of we're going to add to his program so that he can self-contain kids when he needs to, to get them out of the classroom. That's another issue that's going on right now. I think that the autism spectrum, we have 20 kids throughout the district in the autism spectrum, but we have really well-trained people for that at this point, that we are really programming for them just fine.
How many paraprofessionals did we have to
We had to bring
hire
back, yes.
this summer because of the increase of,
I think it was a total,
this is preschool now. We had an increase of
we
autistic
had to
children.
bring in 3 for the preschool, and then we later had a child in kindergarten that we needed to bring 1 in for.
So
yeah,
4
we did
additional
4.
paraprofessionals
That's
that
right.
cost on average about 25, 30, not counting benefits?
Oh, the paraprofessionals would be more in the upper teens, low 20s, into the 20s. The paraprofessionals
So then
would
with the
be.
benefits on top of that?
And then some of them would have benefits, and some of them, some don't, but because it's their husband or something that has it. But some of them do have benefits. And at this point, we had, as of this fall still, we still had, I guess it was 3 or 4 people, when we had done the layoffs a couple of years ago, we had 3 or 4 people who were still on the callback list. They're all back now, except for one that went to another district and is working elsewhere now.
The beauty of what Ann's doing with the new programming and the moving of staff and the really addressing, there were many, like 1 kid in each classroom that was making it difficult for all the students. But the beauty of it is that we're looking at really modifying their behaviors, really doing some intensive work with them. So hopefully, as they move up through the system, they're going to be better able to access the curriculum and instruction and be able to be successful in the classroom. So it's kind of twofold. Yes, we're trying to keep them in district, but honestly, we want them in district, and we want to help them at an early age be able to start having program and modification so that they're successful throughout Narragansett.
I have a question on the tuition to mass schools. Would that have been FY12, is that number correct at 18,000?
Yes, and at that time, the state has changed how they want that reported. At the time that you only have the 18, at that time, if it was another district you were tuitioning the child to, you called that mass schools. However, 2 years ago, as you can see, the state changed it, and if we were sending a kid to a collaborative that we were not a member of, in this case it means the Flag Collaborative, then we had to change that and start reporting that under mass schools. Before that, we would have had both the CAPS Collaborative, which we are a member of, and the Flag Cap. We would put those together because they used to report that under just collaboratives. But now, if you're not a member, they make you report it as a mass school. So it looks like a huge jump, but it's really moving from one line to another, is what it is.
So
But the 18 was real because that was one student who is tuition to Winchendon.
So what line would that have moved from?
It would have moved from collaboratives down at the bottom. As you notice, collaboratives. Now, some of the collaboratives come out of the grant. And excuse me, some of the kids that are in collaboratives come out of the grant, so they don't show up here. But you see where you've got 336,702 down below the 18. The 18 is the mass schools. And on that same line, that was FY12.
Okay.
And the 18, but down below where it says collaboratives is 336. That was because, but some of that was now up in that, if you go to the next line, you've got 185.
Yes.
It would be breaking down between CAPS and FLOC.
Okay, so what you actually requested in FY13 was less than what you received in the budget. That's accounting for that mass school.
It's a shift in where it's
because-
reported, yeah.
Because there's almost 100,000 there, and that's what you'd look at.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And can you tell the committee how many people of these entering students were already placed out of district prior to coming to the district this year? Oh, I don't know if you saw that. This year, didn't we have 2?
Yes, we had 2. We had 2, and we had another one that, according to what the previous district had him slated to be in, he was also previously a residential student. We decided to try him in our district, and so far he's doing very well. And so that one has worked. But yes, we had 2 others. We also have 2 children who are placed out of district, who were moved in by an agency. Out of district. They were already out of district.
Those are the biggest factors with special ed, is that you don't know who's going to move into buy a house and move into town. And so these numbers, Ann does a great job really getting these numbers as close as she can. And then we are fortunate to have that grant, and I know that she saves some money in the grant to be able to, if somebody moves in, be able to cover that cost, because we don't really have any savings, any revolving account to come up with $75 or $80 or $60,000 when somebody moves in. So that's kind of how she juggles it. She does a great job.
And every once in a while, somebody moves away.
Yeah, not as often as
When
they
somebody
move in.
moves away, when somebody moves in. You never know.
Under extended school salaries on the first page, there's an increase of 7,000. Is that increases in salaries, or is it more people?
It is in salaries, but it represents several more kids. The preschool kindergarten has got a big influx, the same as with what Ruth was talking about, the paras that we had to add. Those kids are the ones that frequently need summer programs. Either the autistic kids or the really involved kids may need summer programs, but those really early ones you almost always do, because as soon as you get started with what you're working on, summer comes and you really do back up when you don't serve them in the summer. So that represents an influx in kids in the summer program.
So because they finished the year, they wouldn't qualify under the preschool grant that was just referenced? If these are preschool kids that are extending that, is it because they're now kindergarten eligible?
Yeah,
that-
but we're also responsible for the special ed preschool kids.
It's not covered in the grant?
No, it
Not
wouldn't be
the preschool
not
grant.
totally, yeah.
In the home tutoring, you didn't have anything, you had requested in 13, it wasn't funded, and then now you've gone back to 5.
Well, because we always have it.
We do always have it.
It was cut back, but that does not represent just special ed kids. That represents regular ed kids who get hospitalized, and we have to provide tutoring while they're hospitalized. So that, I'm actually out of our office, we're paying for both regular ed kids who have been injured or are sick and have to be tutored, as well as special ed kids. But there's always some every year.
You know, people who have handicapped, special need children, I should say, in their home, they really want to fight tooth and nail for the best for their kids, and you can't blame them for that. And sometimes there's information out there that they take for gospel that really isn't accurate. We got a lot of, within the past 6 months, from a mother who wanted to know why we didn't have special playground equipment for her child, because she knew there was $30 billion with a B dollars sitting in Boston that's designated for special needs kids. And
Well, somebody needs to unlock that vault.
yeah.
Right, I agree. We could all use it.
So Ann had to handle that correspondence for us.
Yes.
But there's all kinds of stuff out there that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes, some parents have advocates. That always
Yeah.
adds a nice little pressure.
The other thing that Ann and I had to do this year was, what was the state report for special ed that we have to answer to every few years? I was going to
Oh,
use
it's
an
the
acronym.
coordinated program review.
Coordinated Program
Yeah.
Review. And as a part of that, they look at the facilities for our special education students. And in the last review, which was, is it every 6 years?
Yeah, 5, but this
5.
was 6, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 5 years ago, we were cited for saying that our special ed students that we educate in Phillipston Memorial School were not given the same or equal space for learning as their regular ed peers. And last time the report was written, the answer to it, we have to answer to these. We get, it's the Department of Ed does this, and we have to answer to them. And last time they answered that we were going to get a new elementary school, which sufficed, which was absolutely fine, because I think the feasibility study was going and things were moving along. So this year, we had the review again, and that answer clearly was not going to be acceptable for this year. So what Ann and I did was we went to every single elementary school in the district with a list of special ed students and their disability, and we looked at the rooms and where, you know, what was going on. And part of the program that Ann had suggested that we move to Templeton was a result of this. And we were also, and we're in the plannings, we don't know yet, of moving one of the preschool classes, because predominantly the students in the preschool are from Templeton. And so we have to look at addressing that report, and we're trying to do it thoughtfully. We are very appreciative to Phillipston for extending their building and letting us, you know, put the preschool there. But we're now at a point where we're coming up with a solution for this report, but at the same time, being able to serve these kids in equal spaces. So that's just kind of an FYI. I don't think it's going to have a financial impact. We're trying to do it. It's going to make a space impact on some of the buildings, but we're trying to do it to satisfy the Department of Education, also to make sure that our special ed students have equal space to regular ed students, while at the same time trying to meet everybody's needs. So we'll keep you up to date on that as we start making some of these changes, but I did want you to be aware that we're trying to be forward-thinking in the adjustments, so the next school year coming in, some of these kids will be coming back to the Templeton schools, some because they would be going to kindergarten anywhere, and others potentially because the population of the 4-year-olds is quite a bit greater, and we have these specialists now in the Templeton schools. That's just more of an FYI.
And the reason we had special needs kids in the Phillipston school is because we have ramps and we have an elevator to go from one floor to another.
That's right. That's why they're predominantly
Right,
there,
that is
yeah.
why, but just, my understanding is that the elevator was purchased with regional school district funds. That was what I was told by Dr. Hemmon, and that was one of the, what we did because we knew that we were going to put some Templeton students in there. So, I mean, it's all been done very fair and above and equitable, but I just wanted to let you know now, this current report coming back again, we're trying to make some maneuvers there.
I think we did that when we put in one of the additions. It was at the same time.
Okay, that makes sense. That was what Dr. Hammond said.
And I'm looking at the percentage of increase in the budgets from what you requested this year in FY13 and what was actually budgeted. That's like 110,000 roughly. And then, so I number one, wonder how that difference is. Clinical assistance for special needs is one of the areas, but it didn't add up to the 110,000.
No,
so I
actually, the 110 would be primarily, some of it is percentage of increase that we have to anticipate that out-of-district schools may get. In other words, you have to anticipate that they may raise. Some of those, the state has already set the rate on some of them are still not set. And so there's an anticipation of 2 to 3%, depending on which school it is. Some of them are one and the other. They usually tell us what they anticipate it may be. That's what part of it is. And then there's the personnel because of raises with staff, and we had to call back some paras. Would be primarily where it is. And I think, you're talking about requested, so the rest of it would not be that different.
I'm not sure I see staff in here. Because even your
Tuition to collaboratives went up.
Yes.
From the requested to the budget
Yep.
by 90,000.
Yep. It did. That's almost all of it. Yes, you're right.
But then it's back down for FY14. We're down now to 200, you were back at 363.
Right.
Did you age out some kids, though? Some kids might be aging out.
I'm just wondering how
And
that...
changed schools is another one. Let's look. Those are the same.
It would be great if when they came in a year, they stayed the whole year, but there is still movement.
Well, actually, I can also say that we have one of the new kids, actually 2 of the new kids that came in would make up part of that, the ones that we did not have before. They don't impact this year's budget as much because we haven't had them all year, but next year they'll be here all year, or we have to assume they will be. But it's mainly out of district where that comes from.
And so the 40, your increase for FY14 is basically projecting the increase the collaboratives will have?
That's a lot of it, yes. That's not, I'm sure that if I go through this, there's got to be something else
Well,
that's
there was
different.
that one student that the percentage went way up. I mean,
Yes.
that's a really expensive.
Yes, and we're
out-of-state,
still hoping that's a mistake.
Right. So I think you'd have to see her list, which we can't show you because,
Right,
you know.
right. No,
This doesn't actually include the actual teachers, though, right?
No, the teachers are,
How many of those?
we're going to.
Well, the paras are, well,
Well,
no,
she
they're
might
not.
know.
They're not
Anne Marie
there
might know.
either.
Come on, Emery, spit it out.
Probably at least a dozen
at least it doesn't. So,
But it's not here.
So special ed eats up well over 10% of the total budget.
Oh, it does. Yep.
Very good.
This district has some very significantly involved kids. You know, it's not your old-fashioned learning disabilities kids that need a little help. These are much more involved kids on the whole. They
You know,
really are.
I have to say, I think that this Fed department does a great job with their placements.
Thank you.
Been a little bit involved, but, you know, I think, you know, you look at it and you say, oh, well, why are they going there? Well, the thing is, sometimes they outgrow a school, or they need a different type, and so then they end up, you know, going to another school that's out of the area.
Mhm.
And thankfully, they're there, otherwise, you know, we'd be back in the dark ages doing things with our students.
Yes, that's true. Yes, I was at a meeting earlier today and was
Tom, I
thinking
think
about
that's a
that.
question for you.
What's the percentage of the student population that are identified as special needs?
It was on the October 1st report.
Yeah.
It was 11%. 11%.
Do you know what the state average is?
I'm sure it's more like 12 or 13.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. We're below state average, I know that. Yeah. It's almost always 12 or 13 in the state.
So you all set?
Yeah. If everybody else
Thank you
is.
very much, Ann.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Mineville, our new athletic director, has a budget to present to you.
So the first page indicates what sports we offer, an overview of how many kids we have. This is for this school year, and it obviously doesn't take into account the kids who play 2 or 3 sports. So this is kids out for each team. The 2 teams that we can estimate for this spring are the 2 spring track teams in the range of 50. So this is a pretty good overview. We'll have about 600 individual kids playing sports over the course of the year, with 17 varsity sports, 1 co-op with Oakmont hockey. We have 3 kids on that team right now, 7 JV teams, and 10 middle school specific teams. But the middle schoolers compete in 16 of the 17 sports offered. So I think that's pretty good for what we have. The next page that you see is the actual budget, what it shows, and the first thing that I wanted to address when looking at this, it's a budgeted and actuals from FY11 and 12. It also shows the FY13 budgeted. What was done, I think, was some pretty good forecasting, knowing that a lot of the expenses have been being picked up by the athletic revolving fund over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. So
That's true. I think we had over $100,000 in the athletic revolving when I started, and the last couple years, we've taken between $30,000 and $50,000. We actually only have $17,000 currently in that revolving account. Part of that was the EEE hurt our revenues on football. But so that's why it's really going to be hard to compare these numbers, because it came out of 2 different accounts. So that's going to be difficult to see.
it is very hard, and it's hard for me when I was looking to come up with an FY14 budget, and we're running actuals, and the transportation alone is the most glaring. Transportation is 14 even in 11 as an actual, and in FY12 it was 17,000. We've already spent 30-something thousand dollars on athletic transportation, and we're just finishing up the winter season, and we've done nothing, absolutely nothing out of the ordinary with transportation. So I think my assumption is a lot of that probably came from athletic revolving to help, especially in the year where it was 14 even, to help pay for the transportation more than likely in the spring. And I think, from talking with Tom Miller as well, I think a lot of the supplies that were bought in, especially come springtime, were bought out of revolving. The only, so to speak to the FY13 is 244, currently budgeted. I'm fairly confident that we will be within that range. The proposed FY14 actually includes the athletic director stipend. It's got to be, it could have had to have come out of somewhere, out of the teacher line items for the last couple of years.
It was definitely taken, and we had a teacher doing the athletic director on top of the salary, so I'm sure it was rolled into that line.
Why do we need to?
Why?
Why do we need, why this increase?
It's because it's not an increase, the exact same level funded, because it's a contracted position. It's just that it came out of the teacher salary line in the past, instead of the athletic director line. That was just done historically because the person was a teacher. Mark works a day job somewhere else, and so now we're putting his athletic director salary in the athletic director line where it belongs.
The stipends are, so that it rolls in with the rest of the athletic stipends, including coaches. So on the bottom of this sheet, what I consider fixed, non-changeable amounts are 82%, and really that's over 90% because we'd have to include some supplies. It would have to include some baseballs and softballs and footballs in order to operate a program.
What else is included in fixed costs?
Okay, so the only, if we look at other, is probably the easier way to look at it. What I pulled from other is the middle school intramural programs is a $4,100 line item that has been in the budget. Supplies, all supplies is $25,000, and the fields budget is $18,000 in the proposed FY14. So that's $47,100. Everything else is considered a fixed cost. It's either MIA, conference dues, transportation, and about half the budget would be coaches' stipends, which are negotiated in the contract.
And officials. We have to
Officials,
have
absolutely.
officials.
Officials, sorry, and contract services, which are police detail, EMTs. Can't have a home football game without an EMT.
Do the fees that the kids have to pay to play different sports, how much is that? Would that be, that amount, would that come off the $268,000?
If you look at the income sheet, this current year, we projected $31,000 to come over, and we may be able to hit that, but because of the revolving account being so low, and all the user fees and all the gate receipts and everything goes into that revolving account, because it's so low, we really can't move any more money out of that to supplement this budget as we have in the past few years.
Anyone else have any questions?
Coaches' stipends, are there more? No, that number.
It's actually one less position that I budgeted for.
That's what I meant was less.
For next year. There was a JV in the contract, a JV girls soccer and a JV boys soccer. The JV boys had not filled that position, and the person who had the JV girls soccer position is no longer teaching here, and it was an easy spot as far as numbers on teams, and the boys team managed with the one varsity coach, and we do not have a JV team for either boys or girls soccer. So instead of adding a JV boys position, I decided to eliminate the JV girls position.
Okay.
There is no JV girls team. She was an assistant to the varsity.
All set?
Anything else? No?
No
Okay.
questions?
Thank you.
Mark, thank you very much. Mark's doing an amazing job, given what he was handed, and it's a tough job, especially when he works far away, and he's done just wonderful.
We have a girls game going on.
I know,
Yeah, I
and my
know.
granddaughter's there, that's why I want to get this.
So what you are getting passed out and what you have in front of you, this is a line-by-line item, line-by-line of the budget based on the presentations that you've had over the last 3 evenings that we've met. We put it in there to show you what the budget would look like. I then created a new income sheet, which I just gave you earlier, that would match this budget. We have one more meeting left. In the last meeting, we're going to talk about personnel, and I have to tell you, I can't see that that's going to go down. We have contracted step increases in both unions, so I don't anticipate that going down. Everything's in there, including some of the buybacks that we're required to do for the 2 people that are leaving next year. So what I'd like from the committee is a little bit of direction on our next meeting is our last meeting, and we hopefully will be able to come to a consensus as a group as to the direction that you'd like to go. So if you would like to give me some direction, or if you, how would you like to proceed from here?
In reference to the budget?
Right, we have to come to a number we have to come to a budget next time to recommend to the school committee. Because we have to do a hearing.
I'm to assume that there's a 5.46% increase?
That's what I figured it was, and when Anne Marie and I were at a meeting today with all the business managers that are associated with French River Collaborative, we were talking about budgets, and it was really interesting to me because they all have a 3% or more increase in their budgets, and they said that no one they knew is level funding their budgets this year. I did see some of the surrounding towns coming through with their beginning budgets that are looking like that. I did it just because I wanted to see what the increase was, and I was kind of surprised that it was only 5%. I know Dan shared some statistics with you. Do you have these? Did you get a copy for everyone, Dan?
Yeah, I think we already passed it.
Everybody got a copy.
Yeah.
That he pulled off and made some projections. You can check these if, I'm sure you can get the information from the Department of Revenue. But it will show you the percentage increase over the last few years, which had been, according to these figures, about less than 0.5%. But in addition to that, don't forget that we have had a 2% inflation rate and a 1.6 inflation rate every single year. And so I think, I'm not saying this is the budget that we need to present, but I'm saying that I don't want it to be viewed as completely unreasonable, because I think that you heard the folks that have presented their budgets, and I'm not sure any of them were extravagant at all, and asking for things that they need to do their job to meet the needs of the kids. And also, so much of it is actually state and federally mandated. So I guess I'm looking for some direction as to how you want to proceed.
I'm new to this committee, but I'll tell you, right now I feel nervous. I mean, if we accept, as we just heard, this athletic budget is 17.5% increase. The other budgets are also increased. You know, you can present a budget that's reasonable, but still has room to be looked at for some cuts. It's you know, it's fine to come and say what you'd like and maybe not be that top level, but the reality of the situation is it can't take a 7.5% in that budget, never mind what the high school budget was. That percentage of increase just was huge. And so I'm looking at budgets and saying, how do you people do that? I mean, at some point, I would have expected we'd look at them and asked for the administration to come back and say, well, we've had a discussion, maybe this goes and that goes. I don't know, so I'm looking for direction, because I haven't been on this committee before.
And neither have I, but I pretty much was expecting the same thing. I'm looking for you to say, all right, if we can't do this, where could we make some cuts, or what, because I'm telling you, we're looking at losing part of the police department right now. So I can't go back and say, you know, I think this is great, I think we should go for it. I think it's great. I wish we could go for it. But I wouldn't be doing my job if I just said that.
Tom?
First of all, I'd like to commend all the departments except for the high school principal. An absolute tremendous job that they did presenting budgets and showing us increases and showing us differentials over many years. I guess the next time I see the high school principal, I want to talk to him about his guessing game. I personally think that was totally unprofessional, and I'm done with that in that sense. I think, based on what I have seen in, and I read many periodicals, up in the Newburyport area, Worcester Telegram, I'm definitely in tune with Franklin County because I work there and I have to keep a handle on it. I think this is rather high. I don't want to go line by line and say this should be cut out, that's your job, or I shall say your administration's job. They know what they need and don't need or could do without. And I think more reasonably, and I do feel your pain, Templeton, I think more of a 2% would be somewhat palatable.
Okay. What would 2% be as a total cut? I don't have my calculator. I know you didn't bring yours?
I usually bring one too, I didn't either.
Oh, wait a second. I do have it. Hold on. I have my phone.
Are we allowed to ask questions, or is this just for you?
You need to ask the chair.
School committee, I'm sorry, budget committee. Are we allowed to ask you guys questions or talk, or are we just here for observation?
Mr. Sandin, would you allow the audience to speak?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, it's an open meeting, right?
I don't know the rules.
Open meeting, I'm assuming you can speak.
That's up to the chairman of an open meeting.
So, I don't know what the budget looks like. I haven't been to all the budget meetings. I'm a parent and a teacher, and I know that there are classes and textbooks. There are programs that have been cut, that there's a lot of bare minimums that go on. So I know the budget probably looks really big. Again, I don't know what it looks like. I just know that I'm very concerned for our kids with what we have, and what we keep cutting. And I know that a lot of people don't have money and taxes increase, and I get all of that. I just, bottom line, we're in charge of the children. And we're in charge of trying to make a system that works for them. That's our job.
Go ahead.
Anybody that thinks that I don't feel that same, I mean, I was brought up here, my children were, my grandchildren are here now. I want it to be a great education for them. But I also have to look out for the town's interests, because if I could just say, okay, I'd like to give you this part of the budget, this part of the budget, and this part of the budget, I would give you all your new school books, I would give you a new math teacher in the middle school, is that where we said that? Yeah. But we can't pick and choose. We have to just go for a bottom line. And so I believe if we go for a bottom line, then it's got to be up to somebody else to say, okay, we now have to find out where to cut that. And you need to remove yourself from being a teacher. I know that sounds stupid, but
More importantly, as a parent,
be a parent.
my kids go to this district.
Be a parent, but the teachers have to understand, and I know it's their job, and they do a great job at what they do, But we have, all of our town employees had their pays cut last year. We also cut off a whole day out of their work week. So if the teachers' union is looking at increases, maybe they ought to think about what they could do to help the situation. You two, remove yourself from being a teacher.
I want to address your comments. I affectionately can say that I've been in the teaching business for 37 years. And there are some times that I detest comments in reference to, and I got this sense, and I apologize if I'm wrong, that by sitting here, we're not looking out for the kids. I also was a single parent. I sent my kids to this school. They both graduated from this school, and they went on to higher education. But, like Templeton, I have to look at everything. When you want your roads plowed and cleaned, and the corners cleaned after a monstrous storm, and we say, well, no, we'll give it to the education, and the heck with you people, you worry about getting there. Like Boston, you know, people were snow blowing streets that they didn't get plowed. It's a very precarious balance, and I charge anybody to sit here or get involved in your town's finance committees so that you can understand the mechanics. It's a balance. And I don't know if
You're doing well. Keep going.
It's not like
Keep
being
going.
recorded or anything.
yeah, I mean, you know, I didn't have my hair done for the TV tonight.
Templeton is presently, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, because I'll get my thoughts.
Templeton is presently going through the preliminary stages of their budgets. In the information that we've given all our departments from the advisory standpoint is that level fund, even after we cut $107,000 last year, we need to take a look at additional 5%. So we're looking at some additional cuts this year in our budget, let alone trying to increase. So I guess from the perspective of overall budget, because we asked them, rather than for us to come and cut your budget and say, this is your bottom line, and then have problems here as to how we got to that particular figure, we asked them to go off and do what they could as far as making cuts so that we can have an affordable budget with minimal amount of effort on both parts and saying, okay, we can live with this. We understand that we have some issues, but we have to work within our means, and we're not, basically, if you look at this, and I looked at just Templeton's portion, you're talking about approximately a $2 per thousand increase just on your increase on what you're talking for the budget. That represents a $200 increase for a $100,000 home. The average is more than a $100,000 home.
What is your tax rate?
Right now it's $14.60.
$14.60 per
Right.
thousand?
By the way, that was last year's. The tax rate has not been set because of our budgetary problems that we've had. We're working with the DOR right now on that. So I mean, that could change.
Yes, we've not even been able to send out tax bills yet because the
And I'd
DOR
like
won't allow
to
us.
finish my thought.
Yes.
And so, like Templeton, and I can honestly say that I've been on a teachers negotiating committee since they invented the word. And I charge the teachers because at least our team, and we're negotiating now, has a sense of the needs of the school, has a sense of the needs of the county, and so I'm going to charge your team to become more realistic, investigate things like interest rate bargaining so you can sit with the people who you bargain with and do it maybe in a more reasonable manner and understand what's going on. And I'm also, and correct me if I'm wrong, what has your association done to go out, spend association money to promote, support the school budget, to get out there and try to convince the, you know the statistics on the override, what, 2 to 1? 2, 3 to 1? Convince those people to vote the overrides if they're needed.
Tom, just to let you know, the union and I agreed to do interest-based bargaining this year. So we have looked into that, and we are going to get the pre-training, yeah.
And I
think
talked
it
to you
would
about
help.
that, and I think that's the best thing that a
great.
teachers' union could do, because then it's from inside on both sides.
Right.
And it becomes a friendly atmosphere and not this absolutely horrendous, and I've been through it, monster of a situation. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
you know what
I
I'm
do.
talking about.
This is a very difficult for both the community and the school. And believe me, I've talked to a number of people. They're all saying that we need to take and support the school, but it's a case of affordability. Can most of these people afford some increases in what they pay for real estate taxes? And in most cases, they're saying we can't. We can't end up living with large increases. That's why you see them turning down overrides on this. And I mean, right now we're looking at our budget. If we have to make those cuts and look at what we have to do to take and end up giving you some additional money, we're looking at cutting highway, fire, and police. And I mean, as I told you before, it does not make, we can have an excellent education program, but if we can't end up plowing the roads and we can't provide public safety through fire and police, it does us no good that they can end up having a wonderful education system which we can't support.
And I want to add to that, if I may. And if you can't supply police protection on a lockdown, at least have an officer come in
Right.
and walk the building on a lockdown to make sure everything is done properly. It's a balance.
Well,
It's a balance.
this committee is charged with coming up with a reasonable, workable budget for the district. That's what this committee is here for, nothing else.
And does that mean that we're supposed to go through all of these lines and
No.
say?
No, what I wanted to do was direction, because in the last couple of years, your minimum contribution has gone up, and it constantly goes, and there was $1.5 million of override money, and I know it only goes to the school that 1 year, but hold on, just hear me out. And so over the last several years, that $1.5 million has gone away. We've taken, our budget used to be close to 21,000. $1 million, I mean. We've taken millions of dollars of cuts. That's fine, but every time the increase goes up so soon, you've essentially, the override money's gone away, because that's how you've offset the increase in what the state, in a minimum contribution, doesn't even come close to what you actually, with special ed costs, with health insurance costs, with all the required things we have to do. Those are going up every single year.
As they
So,
are in town, too.
no, I understand that. I'm trying to explain this budget. So we have taken those cuts. We have cut 20-plus teachers. Every time somebody retires, we don't replace them. It's not that we haven't, but I kind of do need to know that the minimum contribution, and then if you go back to the first income sheet, then you have additional appropriation, and then you have an increase in your minimum contribution. Are we really looking at taking another $600,000 or $700,000 off? Because I don't want to be the one to say, athletics is gone. Class sizes in 7th and 8th grade are going to be 40. Kindergarten classes are going to be size 30. Those are the choices we are making. And I don't want to presume that that's the cuts that this committee wants to take. So that's why I'm asking for direction, because if I come back and I try to make it reasonable and we have a 2% increase, but you really wanted a 5 or 6% decrease, we're not going to be able to settle on a budget. So I don't think anyone, I agree that the high school budget was overstated, but I don't think if you look at the middle school and the elementary schools, what they were asking for to try to meet these new state standards. We have evaluations that are new, we have to redo the whole Common Core, we have all the special, I mean, there's a lot of mandates. So I guess what I'm saying is not saying necessarily, go through and tell me what you want to cut, but certainly give me a realistic number, and so that you'll know how deep, because I think what Peter said the other night was right. You got a flesh wound, then you cut through the muscle, and now we're going deep, deep into the bone, and I know that you guys have too. But I'm here to support our students, to push for money for them, much like you're here to push for the police and fire. I get it, but we, at some point, have to all come together, or not, in a budget that we move forward to the school committee. So?
I just want to address, you mentioned the high school budget again, and I'm talking personally, by not presenting, like the other departments have done, music, sports, et cetera, a final number, I personally felt like, well, what's he hiding? I don't have a comparison from last year. Some departments went so many years back, and then I don't even have a number for this year. So right away it sets up in my mind, nice presentation, I understand what he's trying to do, et cetera, but then I think, well, if he won't give the number and he gets into a play game about it, then what's he hiding?
That's why we gave you this.
And then getting back to...
It's all here. All that you can, it's all there.
Well, he should have presented it.
No, I hear you.
Okay? And
That's fair.
in terms of this, I don't come here to scrutinize this.
Okay.
I come here,
For the income
bottom
sheet.
line. What's it going to cost Phillipston? The district hires a seasoned, trained, educated, qualified individual.
Thank you.
Your job.
Okay, but do you
I'm
understand?
being serious.
No, and I am too.
serious.
Did you
Because
understand
know
why I
better
asked this
than we do.
question?
Because I can say, well, look at, cut that.
Right.
I'm gonna sit here next week and I'm gonna say, cut that. I don't work here. I don't
No,
understand.
Don't have a
appreciate
real
that.
sense of what would hurt the most.
Right, right.
I mean, I can sit here and listen to the principals' budgets, and I'm, half in tears because they don't have books. They haven't had books for 8 years. They don't have a math teacher, and they're going to fail their accreditation, and that saddens me. But once again, we don't get to choose all of the other stuff in the middle. I mean, we've got and I'm not picking on that, but we've got an office budget that's doubled.
An office budget?
Uh,
Anyhow. But
Yeah,
my point was, I
from
just
22
need
to
to know,
45.
what's the target? What am I shooting at?
Well, when I threw out 2%,
That's,
I was trying to think.
thank you.
Try to backtrack it to Phillipston's case, try to think in terms of what we supported last year.
Yep.
Can we support something along the lines of that? And like Templeton, we're looking at, everything's frozen this year.
Yeah.
We went through 2-3 years, correct me if I'm wrong, Ruth, of everything was frozen. And then the selectmen chose to give increases. So then we went with that. But I sat and I convinced the selectmen to freeze it again, and as I sit and look at the economy and the state and the reimbursements from the state, I'm concerned that maybe our town also has to look at maybe a decrease, not necessarily in frozen salaries, but a decrease in expenses. and sit here and worry, looking at the preliminary numbers, that even with your budget around 2%, and you know Phillipston has always come forward, it might be a tight one for us to work it into our budget as we have in the past.
Okay, that's fair.
Of course, as you said, you don't see the numbers that we're looking at in the budget. I mean, the state has already said you're going to be down $542,000 is your decrease of estimated revenues.
That's because we used all our reserves to backfill the
Right,
budget.
so I mean, some of it's the state, some of it's the reserves. but-
Most of it's the 400,000 of the reserves that we've been using over the last 3 years.
So the thing is right off the bat, it's looking to the towns for that extra $542,000. That's as a level funded budget. So to increase it by 5% might not, you know.
I wasn't ever
Increase the
suggesting that.
tax.
I was
So
just
just
putting
doing what
down
it
on
is.
paper what you
Yeah.
heard.
So I mean, you know, you should have an increase over your level funded. You know, and at least to go back to what your fiscal, you know, your 13 request was. You know, you didn't get all of that last year.
No.
So, and I don't know where the 2% would fall, at least it would bring it, you know, and I think it needs to at least.
2% would be 363,291 over the 18,164,592.
Yeah.
But, yep,
Well, my fear is, like Ruth just said, you're kind of losing ground over these
Right.
few years. And then if you have to make cuts, then the class sizes become larger, and then you have, it's a less attractive school system.
Correct.
So you lose money with school choice, either people don't come
Right.
or you lose people. So that has to be taken into consideration. That's a revenue.
right. It is a
Or-
house of cards, because we've been backfilling almost $1 million a year in school choice, 800,000. That's a lot of money. And if you lose that revenue, it's kind of double, because if they don't come, that's okay, you lose the revenue, but if it's unattractive, you lose, you kids go out, and you lose, they walk out with almost $13,000 in their pocket when they leave.
And that's
So
the
it's a
difference
house of
between
card.
a budget for the town and a budget for the school.
Right,
There's
right.
a difference there.
And having the school choice has been able to afford your own children many more things because the money they bring to the town, it helps provide more opportunities. So it is, it's very difficult, and I'm not promoting the larger budget. I just put that down to as a starting point. But like you say, if we're starting below what even is, it's a very scary proposition, and I appreciate your understanding of the school choice and how that plays in. Tom?
I have a fear, and I know we've left here years past supporting a certain budget,
Yep.
but as it ended up being turned out,
Right.
it didn't fly. And I have that fear again tonight. I mean, if we were to come into, make a decision that 2.5% is reasonable, and that we could probably go back to our towns and within our budgets, make it happen. I have a fear that that'll fall apart at some point. And it could happen in either town. I'm not throwing any stones, and I definitely understand Templeton's situation. And I'm not saying, level funded, but somehow we've got to, we can't do it, because
Right.
we're finance committee selecting
Right.
people, school committee people. And again, I don't know the past history of the association involvement in promoting budgets and monetary radio spots and newspaper ads, et cetera, but I think it's time for them to get out and promote this school, because eventually they're the ones that are going to get hurt when their staff gets smaller and smaller.
I think he's right, because even if we say, and I don't know how we'd ever do it, but if we say we could go with a 2 or 3% increase, we can't guarantee you that the town's going to vote it.
It's true.
So,
I guess my suggestion or comment would be, is there a way for you to incorporate it in your budget so that it doesn't go to?
well, you know, Will would be the better person to answer that
I
question
don't
right
know.
now.
I don't know.
I think we really need to spend, before we answer that question, though, I think we need to spend, Will, the coordinator, and myself, we need to sit down and, weigh some things out. Because it's all going to depend on, do we want to let the night crew go from the police department? Maybe we could do it like that.
And Temple, I don't think, is in any position to do that.
Right.
I mean, when you start looking at the situations that are rising in the area.
Exactly.
I mean, it's getting close, other gardeners.
So I'm thinking if it's going to happen, it's going to happen with an override. And we don't have a really good track record for that.
It's true.
Templeton is presently looking at, for next year, above and beyond what we did last year, 107,000, probably about $160,000 to $163,000 more cuts.
In this budget?
In our budget.
How did you factor our budget into your budget? Have you factored that in yet?
No. That's just cutting.
We don't even have our numbers
That's cutting
from the
from the
state
general
yet.
fund, which means we're going to have to cut those items that I told you, all the public, everything that we tried to save last year, public safety, is going to be cut. What does that mean? I don't know. That could mean that we lose police protection. It means that we probably lose highway employees. It means that we can't end up having fire safety to the level we have it. Those are the cuts that we're looking at, because right now we're sitting, most employees, even though they don't get very much money in Templeton, they're sitting at 35 hours, most of the people, except for the public safety people.
No, I understand.
We're probably looking at additional cuts even to those. To those folks, can they afford it? Can they afford any more? And the answer really comes back is, how much can you cut your employees that you already have
Before
and
you
their
start losing
benefits
services.
before you start losing them, and they can't afford to live in this community.
Last year, the town didn't opt to go for an override. I think it was on the ballot initially. Would it make sense to at least ask the taxpayers? And I think last year we were looking for a couple $100,000, but I said, you had that one-time debt exclusion of $500,000 on the books, and that was going to fall off, which would effectively have your taxes go down. To some degree, they'll go up a little, but when you take $500 off the rolls, that affects your tax rate. But hear me out for a second. If we're talking about this deep of cuts at the school level and at the town level, wouldn't it make sense to at least ask the question if the taxpayers, all the taxpayers, everybody out there, and they may say no, but I don't see why it would hurt to ask.
When you end up going for an override, as simple as a $50,000 for a highway department truck, and you can't even get that to pass, how do we expect anything else to pass as an override?
I'm not saying you could, but I'm like, why not ask?
I would suggest that we'll ask, or I'll suggest that we ask. I can't make that decision on my own. But people are looking at what we've got now and what we're cutting now, and they're not gonna think positively about it.
To put it in perspective, Phillipston's total budget is around $3 million. Templeton's is around $11 million.
13 million.
13 million. and the school budget is 18 or 19 million. This is the biggest chunk of the two towns' budgets, actually. Bigger for Phillipston than it is for Templeton. It's about 54% of the total budget in Phillipston. 46% in Templeton. It's a big chunk of the budget.
I just want to interject, and that I think what we're doing right now in terms of discussing this has been one of the most productive
I think so.
things, not only so that the people out there, when they watch this, can maybe get a sense in terms of what's going on, how hard this is, the situations that actually exist, and it's you know, we've in the past, yep, okay, this is nice, see you later, all those in favor. No discussion about needs in the towns, no discussion in terms of budgets in towns, no discussion, it's like, okay, we'll see you around. And the impacts across the board, it's unfortunate our economy is in the way it is such, but that's where we're at. And on a small scale, we can't change state and federal government. But going back to what I said, I think this is a very healthy discussion that we're having right now in terms of each town's needs, each town's problems. I'm not here to solve Templeton's problems, but I can appreciate what they're going through. And I think, you know, we're doing good right now, and the people who watch this should appreciate what's going on with this group, what's going on in their towns, and try to look at the global picture in terms of the two towns and the school.
And
Maybe what would be helpful is if you could come back and present some possibilities of cuts, and then give us the ramification of making those cuts. Maybe that would be helpful.
that would be fine. I really didn't think that you were going to give me cuts, but I did want to have the dialogue, because we don't. We need to be honest, and I need to know if Templeton's going to take away the 352 and the 178 increase, and that looks very, very different and pretty horrible and probably jeopardizing our school choice, than if you say, all right, maybe we can do a 2 or 3% increase, but you're going to have to ask for an override in Templeton to get it passed. Those are very different conversations. That's what I just need to know. We all need to know. And I am a believer in let
Tell
the
me what you
people.
want me to say to the people that are already saying to me, if the school wants more, then why don't they go for the override?
Well, but see, the thing is, if Phillipston can actually pass it within their funds that they have, they don't need to go for an override. They can pay what we're assessing them. If Templeton, it can't meet the same need, then we don't need to go, it's the town needs to raise more money for the school. It would be we'd have to push to try to get that to happen, but it would be a town of Templeton override, because Phillipston, and I asked this question of someone to make sure this was accurate, but I don't know if Phillipston wants to go for an override too and throw the money in.
Well, you know, in terms of Phillipston's budget right now, I'm looking at basically last year's budget and last year's school's money. I can't say, you know, override or not. We've always worked hard to see that the school budget worked into our budget. In addition to looking at possible cuts in expenses in town, further than being frozen, there is starting to be a groundswell after the last special town meeting of concerns of using stabilization funds to balance the budget, number one, and even to the point of putting money back into stabilization. And so until we actually start crunching the figures down, having our meetings, maybe mid-March, we'll have a better handle on it. But, I wish I could have them
So it sounds like Phillipston's somewhat in the spot we're in. We used our reserves over the last few years, and
Right.
we really need to stop doing that. It would be great. Our auditor would like us to put some back, which I don't see that happening anytime soon. So it sounds like you're in somewhat the same spot.
We can't say the same, no?
No, you absolutely can't say the same.
I just-
Your reserves are
I
used.
wish we ended up being able to say we had sufficient reserves. We don't. We're in a position where last year, going into last year's budget, and stabilization, we had $1,700. That's,
$1,700.
if we ended up having just one major issue, we would done.
You should have over $500,000 in stabilization.
Exactly, exactly.
The school
should have
the school
between-
should have nearly $1 million, over 900,000.
Right, we should.
In stabilization.
But we don't.
Exactly. And it concerns me that we're not able to end up doing that.
Just think of the special needs kids we were talking about tonight. Just special needs, and a lot of that is mandated by the state, but not funded by the state, a lot of
Right.
it. That's well over 10% of the school budget right there, if you figure in those 12 teachers that are involved in it. It's a lot of money.
Yep.
$1 billion here, $1 billion there, pretty soon you're talking real money, right?
Yeah.
Tom,
All right, and when we talk about stabilization for both towns, and then we talk about monies for Narragansett District, another concern of mine is the E&D money, because that's basically in case of emergency kind of stuff, and I would hate to see something that happens that because there's no E&D money, it would have to go to an override, and what if the override didn't pass? And there are some concerns that as I sit here over the years, and I think, wow, wow, wow.
Actually, that was, all of a sudden, as I was kind of thinking, would a school override for both towns have a better chance of passing than just a Templeton override?
I think it would.
Honestly, the
Yeah.
answer to this is twofold. I agree with Virginia. I think it would have a better chance, but there are conditions that would have to be met for it to really happen. The most important condition is the parents of this town have to vote one way or the other, but they need to get out and exercise their right to vote. So you all who sit there and make these decisions for the town are doing it because you're hearing from a broad base of people. And I'm not sure that the parents have come out to vote. I don't know for a fact, but when you look at the polls and the data, we have not had large turnouts for the overrides. In part, it's very difficult for families, and I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, but when you're juggling sports and activities and baby and all of that, to get to meetings and to do all that is difficult. That's why we went to all this effort to make sure that these meetings and all the meetings are being filmed so people can be informed. But the other thing is that it would be really important, and I've gone to the select board the last couple of years and said, at least please have the vote. I know you can't do it shortly after, although I think you can actually schedule a town election very shortly after, as long as the warrant articles are in. But to get our budget on June 28th, and families are gone, vacation or whatever, and I understand there's absentee ballots, I get it, but if you really want to hear the whole voice, then maybe, I don't know if there's a possibility that you could schedule the ballots, votes, 2 or 3 weeks after your annual town meetings, so that then if we have to make cuts, we can get it done, people know what they are, and we move on. But it was very, very difficult to start a school. We didn't even have a normal middle school schedule because of the cuts we had to take. It was a complete mess. I've asked the select board to do that the last 2 years, to please just put it in the beginning of June. So when I have to tell teachers by June 15th that they don't have a job, that I can lay people off and do that. And so that also, you know, if you could do it in May, that's even better, because these people could maybe go out and find other jobs if the override doesn't pass and we have to cut them out of business. So I agree, Virginia, if both towns went for an override, I think that would be great. I think if we could schedule the ballot votes shortly after the town meetings, that would be extremely helpful, because then everybody would know right away, here you go, this is what you're dealing with. And do I want to do it? No, but I feel like this is so tight and it is such a slippery slope that we really need to ask the voters, what is their will?
I told you how I felt, and I meant that, but on the other hand, just so we see the other side of this picture, the school department is going to have to go after an override when we finally get all the land and everything settled for the new school. If they already just did one for the school, they might not be as eager to do another one. So
Except that your school building wouldn't be an override, it would be a debt exclusion.
Right, it's different.
yeah, it is different, but.
I mean, it's raising taxes, but it's a different.
It is,
it's a
except the
different
general
source.
population doesn't generally understand any of that. So I wish they did. I wish we could have meetings to make everyone understand how that works.
Well,
but-
Virginia, to that point, I have made myself available to anybody, anywhere, anytime, in their homes, if it's, like for parents, if it's hard to come out, on Facebook, anywhere. If there's a group of people, I plan on seeing the seniors, I want to explain because when you hear it, when you guys heard these presentations,
Yeah.
it wasn't like they were asking for the world.
No.
So
I mean, they've
think
got it down
that,
to $287 instead of $300. I mean,
Right.
I appreciate that.
Right.
And I believe that it's true that there are no books here and no books there.
there aren't.
And that appalls me.
But I think that I'm willing to go out and talk to anyone and everyone that would like to hear an explanation. We can agree to disagree, I'm fine with that, but at least let the school explain why they're asking for what they're asking. And then if people can't do it, they can't do it, but at least everybody's going to hopefully vote based on accurate information. I don't know. What do you think, Will? Pretty quiet?
Unusually quiet.
No, I see we are very, it's a two-edged sword here, because if we end up, even for those parents, an increase in the tax rate, and I know that they want their kids to have a good education. If we do that for some parents, there's going to be a sacrifice on the other end if we raise taxes. And I'm not sure that they can end up affording that. Unfortunately, we live in an area in Northwestern County that's not exactly flowing in money. I wish we had a benefactor for the community. I really do. Because it would be nice if they could end up getting $1.2 million to any community, that they can end up affording what we really need. But we don't have that. And it comes down to what can the voters and the taxpayers afford, and what are they willing to take and pay? Are they willing to give up that medication? In some cases, it's the elderly that you're asking that they can end up raising $300 to $500 in their taxes, just looking at this budget alone, okay? I'll just talk about that. If you do that, that means that they will end up cutting back on their medication. That means that they may not end up getting the meals. That's just one portion of the population. Then you end up looking at the parents. I mean, you know that I'm for the children because you saw me go out there at the fair and look for Muddies for those kids that are homeless, because I feel the pain. Unfortunately, we don't have the money to take and end up doing that. I mean, it's really difficult. I sit here and I wonder how we're going to end up as a community to take and end up affording everything that we need, whether it's in the school budget or the general fund. And I don't have an answer.
Do the seniors don't have some sort of fixed tax increases? Or there's no compensation for the senior citizens for the taxes? That's a serious
Not
question.
until after you get past age 70 to begin with, then you get some rebate on your property taxes, but not until after age 70.
Yep.
I'm hearing what you're saying,
Yep.
and I want to take this to a little different level. I'm a class advisor. We have class advisor meetings of all 4 classes, and we talk. And one thing that we're seeing is our fundraisers are raising less and less money. And the quantities that people are buying are less and less. They may buy 1 instead of the 5 they used to buy. And it's a direct indication of the kind of money that's in the household to support these kids when they come around for a fundraiser. Our senior class advisor, as usual, you have senior t-shirts, senior sweatshirts. Well, they're doing t-shirts. The cost is $10. And out of 100 seniors, they've yet to sell 1. And she directly attributes it to the economy, the households without money, and not having the kind of money to say, you know, I've supported you helped you on your class dues, I've helped you on the prom, I just can't help you with a t-shirt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you're right. It's starting to trickle down. It's starting to have an impact. And where are we going to go from here? I don't know. I don't have the answers.
Even some of those businesses which we went to, even after that they can look for more money that they can end up giving you for those children, they basically said, "I'm sorry, there is no more. I cannot help you. That's it." So the businesses locally are also feeling the pinch.
Right. Well, I think that there's an awful lot of fundraising going on to supplement the, things that aren't in the budget, and that takes its toll on the community as well. So it's a balance. You can't get it in the budget, then you're going to go out and ask for. It's a catch-22.
As an example, I know the Council of Aging has the Council of Aging Friends, and they end up having a 120 club. They're having difficulty getting people to end up getting into a 120 club, which is $20 is a donation, and you participate in that. They do the sharing of that. They're having difficulty selling tickets. Whereby years ago, it was much easier.
Well, this has been a very uplifting conversation.
Downright depressing.
Well, it's been an interesting dialogue, I'll say that.
It's been a great dialogue. I don't think anybody here doesn't want to give the kids more money. It's just how we go about the budget this year is, I don't think anybody has a rock-solid idea.
I know, and like I said, I think before we give you any more idea, we really need to go back and talk about, now we have this whole thing. We really need to go talk about which direction we're headed in.
Right. No, I hear you. So I will take Dan's advice. I will come up with a few different scenarios, and one of the scenarios will be for an override, probably by both towns. And then you'll see what you could get if you take a chance at going for an override, and then what it's going to be painful. And I have to, the way I'm going to go back is I have to look at what we're going to legally have to do, and it's going to be pretty tight, because I told you about some of the preschool kids, the reports we're getting about our facilities and other things that I have to live to. So it might be something that you might want to cut, but if I do, we're going to get ourselves in trouble. So I'll try to sort that out for you, too.
And I think that we need to look realistically. The parents, we already heard tonight, the immediate response was we're going to have 40 kids in a 7th and 8th grade. That 7th and 8th grade is always an easy hit. We're going to have 30 in a kindergarten. There are places in this budget, I probably won't bring up all that, but that could start to weed out it, and that we not go, because if we're going to have the credibility that we just spoke about, we can't pick those areas that have been already beaten on. And we have to start looking at how some programs could be joined together, or some effect in some of these programs that will do the same thing without literally telling parents, that those two age groups are going to be adversely affected, because those are always the ones that are.
They can't be. If you look at our district improvement plan, that's something legally we're obligated to do, right?
Right, but that's
Right.
what came out right now as the first thing, and so I'm just cautioning that when you do come back, and if we are going to go back and sell this, we've got to look at the 17% increase budgets, get those down in all of those areas, so that if we said it was going to be level funded or a percentage or two above it, we believe that those things are what we actually need in the situations we're now in. But that was my caution, because the middle school and the kindergartens have been hit before, so we should take into account what has been hit, or else we're not going to take those parents with us.
No, I agree. One idea I had, but I didn't think it was going to be a good one, but when I looked at the ridership in the buses, you know how I cut 3 buses out last year. Our high school kids literally don't ride. We drive the buses, but and going to a 2-tier doesn't really save us any money, because we pay per bus per day. But if we did have them ride, now we'd have to think of what we're going to do with the 5th grade, because I don't think anybody's, even though the high school kids literally, on some of the buses, is 2 kids. I mean, it's crazy. The bus company told me that if I ever wanted to, I could actually have the middle school and the high school ride together. That is problematic for the younger kids, and that's why I haven't brought it up to this point. But if you did that, you then could put your high school and middle school together. You could share some staff, maybe get at what you're saying, which is, maybe keep the class size in 7th, 8th low, but, be able to share, keep some electives at the high school. But see, those are kind of the radical ideas we have to think about, but that in itself is a huge issue for parents because of the grades 5 and 6 potentially riding with high school kids, because there are some kids, Phillipston kids predominantly ride. I think a lot of the kids from Baldwinville Center still ride, but there are many, many buses that the bus company told me we could put the 2 high school and middle together, and so it wouldn't save us on busing. I need to be clear with that, but it could save us in staff programming if we blended the 2 schools. That's a huge issue, though. And that, so if we're going to make that kind of thing, I think the school committee has to really weigh in on it, and you really need to think about it.
I'm not sure if I had a 5th grader, I would be really thrilled about that.
Well, when the middle school was designed, that was the problem.
Right.
They
Yeah.
did design it
Right.
because of that. Parents did not want that.
Well, I
However, we're
agree.
in a very different time. At that time, they could buy T-shirts, and they could give them the extra money for class trips without all this. We're in different times. If parents had options on the table with some creative thinking from the administration, do you want your child on a bus, a 5th grader with an 8th grader? It'll save this much if you do. We can do this, and let the parents look at what it is, because the situation is dire. And those options have to come, and they have to make those kinds of choices, or they can vote for an override.
5th grader with
But
a
they
12th
have to,
grader.
with the 12th grader.
The
sure.
12th graders aren't riding. They're just not riding.
But-
And actually, the
They have
12th,
more cars than I've ever had.
But we need to have it laid out.
okay.
Question, parent, 12th grade, 8th grade, 5th grade. When you're talking about merging the bus, is it just the busing itself? Or are you talking about blending the entire school school to where now my fifth grader is going to be interacting with the high school?
No, no, the times would be the same, but because the times are the same, we can share more staff. No, we're going to have the middle school.
I thought that's what you meant, was just busing, which...
Thank
it's a
you
bus,
for that
the bus stays on
clarification.
in a half hour, 45 minutes, put the middle school up front, the high school at well. But the middle school, that high school is up front. And that would be okay?
Right, but literally, I think there's 2 or 3 bus routes that have 2 or 3 kids on them,
Yeah, which is.
high school kids. But, no, and I'm glad you had that clarification. No, the schools would stay the same. It allows us to share the staff of the 2 schools.
Any further discussion?
Just one question, you were talking about combining. Do we have monitors on buses?
No, but we have cameras. They're better.
Any further discussion? Tom?
Yeah, you're looking to bring this to closure.
Yeah.
I want to apologize, Chairman Dan, for my ignorance in reference to your role and the public's role in terms of an open meeting. And I want to apologize for...
Okay. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
Motion made, second discussion. If none, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
I could have stayed another hour.